name is Sayara. This is Anthony and Deja. And we're the Star Siblings. Our research is human trafficking and its effects across the globe, not just in our nation. Just to start off, have a context slide about what human trafficking is. So human trafficking can most be accurately described as one of the largest and most profitable industries available in the world. It has been labeled the #3 illicit industry behind drugs and small arms, to being labeled second only to illegal drugs in terms of criminal profit. Us Star Siblings have analyzed human trafficking over the course of a few weeks and have approached it with psychological, technological, and a historical point of view. Start off with human trafficking and the history of it. So, as I was going through my research, I found that one of the first instances of human trafficking, looking at it as a labor portion, would be the transatlantic slave trade. So, the transatlantic slave trade was responsible for the enslavement of 12 million Africans across the Atlantic Ocean. White slave masters allowed the cruel enslavement of Africans by having them employ in harsh conditions and physically, mentally, and emotionally abusing them, using their race as an excuse to act in inhumane ways upon Africans. Ways that this enslavement was managed in history was through several attempts, such as the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment, but both have terribly failed as history continued. The Emancipation Proclamation was a political attempt to try to unionize the nation and use the Africans as a pawn in order to achieve his goal. And the 13th Amendment, as we both all know here, was created several consequences that today's society that we're dealing with, such as the mass incarceration. And now going to the sexual aspect of human trafficking. One of the first instances were called white slavery, and that began once the transatlantic slave trade became illegal. So they started sex trafficking white women, mostly predominant in Europe. White women's fragileness was used against them in an effort to create profit out of exploiting them. Women were passed amongst each other in different borders and used as maids, nannies, and etc. Ways to try to eradicate this problem like doing border watches, but that failed because not everybody is gonna say that they're a victim of sex trafficking, and so they couldn't really take anybody's word and just let it go by. Now I'm going to the technological aspect.
Now, technologically speaking, since we are now like evolving into a more modern era, and everything is becoming more technologically driven. We're recording this on a phone, we're watching a timer on this computer, right? And everybody here has at least one of these 4 apps downloaded, and what's insane is that traffickers are using these apps and many other different social media platforms to groom their victims in a form of trafficking called technology facilitated trafficking that is booming right now. And what's kind of hard to grasp is that we still don't know too much about it because it's still in its infancies, right? So we don't know too much on how to stop this. However, its implications is that it's making sites like these that are meant to be like fun and like interactive, places that we feel kind of harmed or in danger, right? Now, psychologically speaking, I'm gonna pass it to Deja. You can take it away.
Okay. So many people believe that people get mental illnesses from the sex trafficking just because of being tortured. But what people fail to realize is that pregnancies during the sex trafficking have been proven to lead to the most mental illnesses. Women fear bringing a child into the world of sex trafficking because they fear the trafficker will terminate it. You may be wondering what these numbers on the side represent, but during a cross-sectional survey completed by sex trafficking victims and survivors, studies shown that 29% of these women were reported had at least 1 or 2 pregnancies while being a sex trafficking victim. 42.8% of those women experience a termination forced by the sex trafficker himself. Then 89.3% of those women that had a forced termination, 89.3% of them faced mental illnesses following the pregnancies and terminations. These mental illnesses range from depression, anxiety, self-harm, PTSD, and in fact, according to a U.S. National Library of Medicine, studies have shown that depression after sex trafficking have been found in 40.3% of men, 77.6% of women, and not shown on here so far, but the graph also found that 57% was found in children as well. So everyone knows that sex trafficking leads to various mental illnesses, but what they fail to really realize is that pregnancy is one of the most common ways that people get lots of these mental illnesses. So we have 3 solutions so far, and so psychologically speaking, it's important that victims undergo trauma-informed services so that the healthcare providers can describe and understand what they need for help, and that the victims' families can also understand how to help them as well.
Technologically speaking, something that happens in the trafficking industry is that the victims are moved from place to place in like a bit of a route, and we could use technology to map that route. However, if the traffickers catch on that law enforcement is figuring out their pattern, they can easily switch routes, and we're gonna start back from zero.
And historically looking at it, adding more jobs shows that women who are compelled to go back into sex trafficking, maybe because of profit out of it, will actually eliminate this problem of them going in and out of the ring. Sometimes sex trafficking could be more of a voluntarily thing to do, like doing prostitution for money, but then end up having to go through the cycle all over again. So having more safer jobs or more jobs that are more lenient to the person will probably decrease the numbers of sex trafficking today.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So right about 8 minutes.
7 minutes.